Hi guys, the Benidorm Enthusiast here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about recent changes in the laws regulating tourist rental accommodation. This is closely linked to the tourists go home protests, which we've seen in some parts of Spain this year. But I want to make it very clear from the start that we have had no tourist go home demonstrations here in Benidorm. None at all, not yet anyway. But there are some causes for concern in relation to tourism and how it's being managed. And tourist rentals is one of those issues which is seen to be causing problems, not just here in Benidorm, but in pretty much every tourist town and city in Spain. So the hope is that this recent clampdown on tourist accommodations will go at least some way toward resolving these issues. So what are the issues surrounding tourism rentals? Well, when we talk about these sort of tourist accommodations, we're not talking about hotels or apart hotels which are specifically created for tourists. We're talking about the private rentals, often in buildings and areas which are mainly residential. Your Airbnbs and those sorts of tourist accommodation. The number of these types of rentals has absolutely skyrocketed in recent years. There are around 4,000 registered tourist accommodations of this type in Benidorm, and that number doesn't even account for the illegal ones, of course. Last year, we saw the Hotel Association Hosbec kicking up a fuss about the rising number, claiming it was having a negative effect on the tourism model here. But it's the knock-on effect it has on other socio-economic areas that is being called out more than anything. The general consensus is that the increase in tourist rentals recently has contributed to some major housing problems. It has become extremely difficult to find long-term rental accommodation, and long-term rental prices have gone up massively. Here in Benidorm, if you go back, say, 5 years, you could easily find rental accommodation to live in. And for a one-bedroom apartment, you'd be looking at around 400 to 500 euros a month. For a two-bedroom place, around 550 to 600 euros a month on a long-term contract. Nowadays, you'll be lucky to find a one-bedroom at less than 700 euros a month. Two bedrooms, you're talking anywhere from 900 euros to over 1,000 euros a month. Now, bearing in mind, a lot of the people living here work in the hospitality industry, waiters, bar staff, in cafes, bars and restaurants, which is one of the lowest paid jobs in Spain. It's just not financially reasonable to pay those sorts of rents when you're earning around 1,300 or 1,400 euros a month. We've seen huge staff shortages here because people just can't afford to live here on an average working wage anymore. Many people have been forced to move out of Benidorm to cheaper surrounding areas, and then they found work closer to where they live. There is high demand for tourist rentals here, even more so now since hotel prices have risen. And you can't blame property owners for wanting to maximise income from their properties. Why rent out an apartment for 1,000 euros a month if you can rent it to tourists for 500 to 1,000 euros a week? But it's not just about the money either. Property owners renting out long term run a much higher risk of their properties becoming occupied by people who will pay absolutely nothing at all. It's extremely difficult to get these people out, and then there's very little the property owner can do about it. That's a whole other topic right there, but it is definitely playing its part in the housing problems here in Benidorm and in many other parts of Spain. So what are the changes that they've brought into the laws regulating tourist rentals in our region? Well, here in the Comunidad Valenciana, where Benidorm is, of course, the new regulations are nowhere near as strict as places like Barcelona, where they've said they will stop issuing and renewing tourist licenses completely by 2028, and therefore from 2029 there will be no tourist rentals at all. In this region of Spain, the aim is to better regulate and manage the tourist rentals that already have licenses, make the requirements to obtain and renew a tourist license somewhat more difficult and more specific, and also crack down on the number of illegal tourist rentals operating in the area. The new regulations came into force on Thursday the 8th of August, but existing tourist accommodations have a period of 5 years to adapt to the established requirements. The new law allows for greater autonomy for local councils to limit the use of these buildings, as well as tougher sanctions when regulations are not adhered to, and other new features such as the prohibition of lockboxes for self-check-ins and the obligation to offer a reception service. The Minister of Tourism has warned that the Valencian government will be vigilant in imposing sanctions on anything that is black economy and operating without authorisation. Some of the requirements for these tourist rentals include having emergency instructions in several languages, details of the nearest medical centre and the 24-hour telephone service available for clients should they need to reach out to the renter. As for amenities in the accommodations, they now must have things like a heating and cooling system in the living room area at least, internet connection unless the home is in a geographical area that doesn't have coverage. They must have a washing machine unless it's located in a block which has a communal laundry. Kitchens must have at least a fridge, an oven, hob and an extractor fan. Furthermore, each accommodation must have a set of internal rules and regulations which coincide with the community regulations of the block where they are located. Most blocks have certain times the pool can be used, times when noise should be kept to a minimum, certain areas where animals aren't allowed and all sorts of things like that. So these regulations hope to avoid altering the coexistence of tourists and residents in the same buildings. The registration of all tourist homes will have to be renewed every 5 years, and when marketing the property, the exact location and the registration number must be published. There are lots of other things included. I've just gone through the main points here. We'll post a link in the video description if you want to read into this further. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? Do you think it's going to help resolve some of those issues mentioned at the start of the video? I'm not totally convinced, to be honest. I'm glad that they're bringing in stricter regulations. I'm sure it's going to improve the quality of these types of tourist accommodations and hopefully the quality of life for residents in buildings where there are a mix of people holidaying and living. But I'm not so sure it's going to help with the shortage of long-term rentals. I guess it will come down to how well it's actually enforced too. It's all well and good at making these regulations law, but if nobody is enforcing them, if nobody is checking up on them, it's not going to make any difference at all. The government have said that they're going to be closely monitoring booking sites on the internet and will even draft the services of external companies to track and check up on the properties listed to make sure that they're legal. We'll be following the progress of this and keep you updated on our platforms how things are going. I also think addressing the issue of squatters' rights and tipping the balance of power back to the property owners rather than the illegal occupants would really encourage people to rent out their properties on a long-term basis again. And there really needs to be some sort of incentive to get all the places that are just sat empty onto the long-let market. It's a complex issue, no doubt, but let us know your thoughts in the comments. That's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video and found it informative. Give us a thumbs up if so, and if you're not already, click subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. We'll be delving a little bit deeper into the tourists go home movement in the near future, so click the beer mug in the corner of the screen and get subscribed, and click the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X and TikTok at the Benidorm Enthusiast for all sorts of other content. Stay positive and stay safe.